Today, we are diving into the topic of empathy, what it is, what it isn't, how you might develop it, and maybe some of the mistakes leaders make around empathy. And to do this, I am with Level 52 coach and facilitator, Roxana Radulescu. Roxana, welcome to the Executive Commute.
Well, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on the podcast. And the place that we're going to start is I want to know, how did you end up becoming a coach and facilitator? What led you on this path?
It's funny that the question is about me ending up because I think I've always been one. When I was a kid, for example, the way I would learn would be to teach. I would align all my dolls on the bed and I would teach them everything that I needed to learn. So that's where it started. Then I wanted to become a lawyer. Then I wanted to become a teacher. And I ended up working in law firms as a learning and development professional. So basically teaching lawyers about different skills. I think it's always been my journey. I just didn't know it was called coaching or facilitation. But yeah, I'm a teacher at heart.
A teacher that started with dolls and ended with lawyers, and now
And
with leaders.
exactly, yes.
What's it like working with a group that is so highly intelligent, like a group of lawyers that really pride themselves on knowing the law, having the answers?
Well, it's fascinating. It's challenging and you learn a lot because yes, they're experts. And I've worked with lawyers. Now some of the leaders that I work with are engineers. My parents, both of them were engineers. So I think I kind of had a grasp of, how do you deal with people who are experts in a field that you understand nothing about? But that also taught me to position myself as the expert in the learning side of things. So that I can be their partner, or as we say in coaching, their thinking partner. I think this is whatever expert you're working with, I think this is kind of the implied expectation that you're going to partner with them from your expert and expertise standpoint as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing with coaching is whenever a coach steps into the environment, rarely are we the expert in the field that we work with. It's how do we create the conditions for deeper thinking, more diverse thinking, and that's the partnership element. We're here to talk about empathy. So I'm going to ask perhaps the hardest question of this whole podcast. What is it that makes you someone qualified to talk about empathy?
Well, I've had it. I've had it all my life, and of course, I didn't know it was called that way when I was a kid, and I was categorized as too sensitive. That was one of my labels growing up. So I've always had it. I've always known that sometimes it was helping me and it's helped me along the way. Read the room, read situations, read people, understand what wasn't said, just get a sense of how things were. And it's always also been getting in the way sometimes. It was almost like, you know what they say about the therapist curse? It's like you understand everybody and the reasons of why they do what they do. It was almost like that for me sometimes, where empathy would get in the way of me calling things out or saying something to giving some kind of negative or constructive feedback to people because but I understand their situation. I know where they're coming from. So that's what I've had to wrestle with pretty much all of my life at different levels and in different ways in different situations. But I've learned to work with it so that I get a sense of more balanced empathy. And I find that a lot with some of the leaders that I work with, where they either have too much of it and they're overwhelmed by it, or they're like, I just want to understand what it is because I've seen some people work with it and I don't think I have it. So that's it in a nutshell. It's always been with me to the point I may be curious enough to say, hey, okay, I need to learn more about it because it can work better.
Okay, I might ask some basic or stupid questions, but imagine someone has no understanding of what empathy is, how would you define it?
I would define it as care plus trust. That's it in a nutshell. So I have, and hear me out, working with lawyers, that's the number one thing you learn is that you need to define things before you start talking about them. So because empathy typically is used in different ways. I have the Oxford definition of empathy right in front of me, the Oxford Dictionary, which is the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Now, the Merriam-Webster one is the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another. So two definitions, one more simple if you want. But for me, that's why I say it's care plus trust because I'm going to care enough about you, about your situation, about the result of what we're going through. I'm going to care enough to understand what you're going through without having to experience the same thing that you're experiencing. That's where I'm adding trust. I don't have to be in your situation to understand what you're going through, or I don't have to have been in your situation. It's not, oh, I know I've been there, done that. I know exactly what you mean. No, I will trust that you're going through what you're going and you're feeling what you're feeling without me having to have ever experienced it. And that's it.
What what's important about that? About me trying to understand what you're feeling, how you're experiencing something.
Well, it's important as long as whatever project we're working together in. And it can be at work, it can be at home, it doesn't even matter. If I care about the results that we're going to get, if I care about the actions that we need to take, then it's important for me to understand where you're coming from, what you think about it, how you feel in the process, so that we can move towards that objective in a way that works best for both of us. Because that's what will make us more communicative, more collaborative, more productive, more efficient at the end of the day.
So, something that I've done with executives is the process of empathy mapping.
Mhm.
Really, as empathy as a tool for influence, for connecting your message to the audience. So you understand what they're feeling, what they're thinking, what they're saying to others, and what their pains are about the situation and what their biggest wants are. But that's a very structured tool for helping your message be delivered. What's the right or wrong use of empathy?
I will start with the wrong use of empathy, where you think, first of all, not understanding it is a wrong use of empathy. Because so many times I talk to people who say, yeah, 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 but what does that mean? Does that mean that I have to then agree with everybody and just let them cry on my shoulder? And we're all in that never ending kumbaya. And it's not that. Empathy doesn't mean no boundaries. Empathy means, yes, yeah, I'm gonna stay there with you. And actually, I wanna expand that element of empathy to compassion, because empathy is actually one of the elements of compassion. And it's because compassion is empathy, and then we're gonna take action towards either keeping things the way that they work or changing something in the way we're doing things so that they work better. And that's where I find that if you use it that way, then that's a good use of it. If you use it as, oh, I'm going to use empathy so people know that I feel for them, which that is sympathy, that's not empathy. When I feel for you and I feel sorry for you, but that's not empathy because I'm positioning myself somewhere higher than you are. From the height of where I am, I can see where you are and I feel sorry for you. That's sympathy. Empathy, when I use it right, I'm with you at the same level and I understand where you're coming from. And then we're able to start planning to take action together. That's the good use and empathy. The bad use is when we mistake it for something else, like sympathy.
Okay, so you've said empathy, sympathy. You've also mentioned compassion.
Well,
If we were to bookend
mhm.
empathy, let's go to the opposite side. What isn't empathy, or what would be considered the opposite of empathy?
I think potentially, I'm not saying this is it, but I would think even arrogance, judgment, this is what I see as potential opposites of empathy. Where I'm assuming I know better. I have the solution, I have the answer, or I'm assuming, well, but you haven't tried enough. You're just putting yourself in this situation. You actually like being in this situation of helplessness. You're keeping yourself there. So I'm either the judge or the expert who has all the solutions for you.
So, one of the tensions with a leader, then, if I'm thinking about this, it's part of my job as a leader is to make judgments, is to make appraisals on performance, etc. So, what's the balance of judgment, appraisal, and empathy?
Think appraisal is not judgment. Appraisal is based on data. So you look at what you have, what's telling you that someone is performing well versus someone is not performing well. What are your metrics? What is the feedback? What's the data? You're not assuming stuff when you're appraising performance versus when you're judging. You're To me, judging is, yeah, I think this person doesn't have good intentions. I don't think they're good enough, but I don't really have the data to support my judgment. And even worse, I'm not even looking for it. I'm not gonna look for any data that's gonna contradict what I think because I know better. Because I'm the ultimate judge who knows everything. I don't need anything else to tell me that. That's the distinction that I'm making.
So, one thing in preparing for this podcast that I found fascinating is there's a Yale psychologist, Paul Bloom, where he makes the case against empathy. In fact, I think that's the name of his paper, Against Empathy. And he says empathy is actually the leading motivator of bias and inequality,
Hmm. How come?
because we connect with a certain individual, oftentimes ones that look like us, speak like us, the ones that we can really identify with. And that a deep empathy for that group can actually cause that inequality, the biases that have us play favoritism, or at its extreme, tribalism that lead to you warfare, some of the more sinister activities. That at the root of it, in his case, it comes down to empathy. Deep empathy for this group, therefore, a lack of empathy for the other group.
Hmm. Well, deep empathy. I think this is the key word. It's like deep. How deep? And I think that that's the key element in it. Because yes, if it is too deep, and if you don't know how to swim those deep empathy waters, you're going to drown. Absolutely. But that's the case with every other skill. If you don't know how to navigate that ocean, you're going to get lost or you're going to drown or who knows. So it's
So that
balance.
so there's such a thing as a leader having too much empathy.
Yeah, there is too
What's
much.
the worst? Paint me a picture of a leader that has too much empathy.
So that would be almost like, let's call it empathy without borders. That's it. Because when you don't have, again, empathy doesn't mean not having any boundaries. On the contrary, the fact that now you understand better where that person's coming from, it allows you to establish boundaries that actually work. Because you understand better, because now you are better informed. Again, back to data. And I can give you just a little simple example. You're meeting with somebody and you're supposed to meet at 10 a.m. and they're late and you're there early. And of course, typically when we're late, we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt because we're late for a good reason. And also, typically, when other people are late, we assume they have bad intentions or they don't care or they're not serious.
That character flaw. They
That
can't
part,
manage time.
exactly. So, where empathy comes in is I'm not going to assume because I actually don't know what's happened to them that they're late. If I'm going to assume, I'm going to assume good intentions. And then when they show up and they're late, I'm not going to say, and they're going to say, I'm sorry for being late. I'm not going to say, no problem. Absolutely. Almost like be late next time too. I'm going to say, well, I was here on time. I want to know what happened to you. That's empathy with some boundaries. Like, what happened to you? And next time, please text me or call me or let me know because I worried about you because I didn't know what was going on. Because I was wondering, are we still meeting? Or because I was kind of getting frustrated. Let's agree that next time we're going to do this instead.
So I'm seeing myself in a situation like that. And if you and I are meeting and our 45-minute meeting is now 30 minutes, we've got a lot to cover.
Mm-hmm.
How do I balance the getting the objectives completed in that meeting and still engaging with empathy? Because I know there's a big part of me, if someone's late and I value preparedness, being on time, that you show up like, okay, Roxana, let's jump in. Should I be empathetic in that situation? Or should I just jump in so that we can get the things done that we need to get done?
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a situation where you were in a meeting where everybody was on time, everybody was present, but there were tensions in the room, almost like the elephant in the room, if you want, where nobody would name that. The meeting would go on because, yes, we have to tick some boxes and we have our objectives. But at the end of that session, really, what people were saying as they got out of the meeting was something like, okay, so I didn't get it, almost anything, or I don't know what I'm supposed to do, or why is this important now when we were actually thinking about all of these other things? And this happened. Another example would be you have mass layoffs in companies, and then you have a meeting about your next objectives. You're not talking about it. You're not addressing that kind of elephant where people are thinking about their former colleagues. People are worried about what's going to happen to them next. And you're not addressing that. You're getting into the do and the checklist of, yes, this is what we want to get done. At the end of that meeting, that's not going to be a productive meeting or an efficient meeting because you didn't address that elephant in the room that everybody was being suffocated.
Okay. So I can see what you're saying, and it brings a memory back to me when I was facilitating a group, and there was just a big announcement of divestment of some of the assets that impacted the leaders in the group. I did not know this. The message had just been delivered that morning, but the group was really hesitant. They weren't engaging. And it was a dogfight for the first 15 minutes to get any type of engagement until I just said, hey, guys, this is what I'm noticing. What's going on? And then they mentioned that we were able to burn off some of the steam to move into it. To me, that's very different than someone showing up late and now taking more time out of the five other people to make sure that you feel okay when the fact is you're late and we've got stuff to do. Everyone else is prepared. We're both going to make up stories or have stories as to why that happened. But as a leader leading that meeting, the last thing that I'm worried about is making sure that I don't know how to say it, feels like a misallocation of resource.
Or not. So, for example, I can think about examples where I was late. And I was late I was late at one of my exams in college, but that was not my fault because they actually started earlier than the allocated time that I was supposed to go. But one of the meetings where I was late and I still remember is where I was supposed to interview somebody. and I was late. I was caught in like the subway stopped. I could not send any text messages because I have no coverage. I had no network. There was nothing I could do. I called the minute I got out of the subway, but I was late. I knew it, and I couldn't send a message to that person. And that was important. That was extremely important to me, not as important to them as it was to me. So the way I'm positioning it when somebody else is late is I'm thinking, okay, what would I want if that was me? What would I want to see? What would I want to hear if that was me? So that I can then make the best out of it. Because anyone who's late, again, if I'm assuming good intentions, I'm going to assume, yeah, you're going to be stressed. You're going to feel sorry for being late. You're going to know. People know. I don't have to tell them that they're wrong or that, feel bad about it, please. They're going to feel bad about it because they will know that they're late.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. The last thing I would want is a leader to
Exactly.
acknowledge it in that moment. Maybe after the fact of a meeting can check in, but in the meeting when you're already late, I wouldn't want the spotlight shone on me.
I wouldn't want because I also wouldn't want people to assume that I did it on purpose. I would want, for example, one of the things that I heard from somebody, which again helped me in that scenario where I was late, was the question, what happened? Are you okay? I didn't have to give enough to give all of those details. But that helped me because I knew they cared enough about what happened to me to ask if I'm okay. And then, are you ready to jump into this? The reason why I'm saying that is because if that person needs, I don't know, 2 minutes to grab a glass of water, take a breath, take down that level of stress that they already have, that allows them to participate in that conversation better. Because the minute the emotional is high, the rational is lower. I'm going to need to deal with the emotional part of things and whatever helps me regulate in that moment so that then I can participate rationally to that conversation.
Well, it reminds me of some of the great work by Chris Voss, the hostage negotiator. One of the simple actions of empathy that he stands behind is the art of pulling people out of the amygdala hijack into more cognitive thinking by simply naming, "Hey, I notice you're angry." Or like noticing a feeling, as he says, labeling it, has them articulate it, and maybe not doing that in front of a room necessarily, or maybe so.
Just that question and sometimes with coaching clients as well. Some of them just come into the session or into the coaching conversation and they're angry or they're frustrated or they're extremely agitated or upset. And just a question of what do you need to do to be able to be here, to truly be present in our conversation? And they pick, like, again, some of them just have a glass of water. Some of them say, you know what, I could use some breathing exercises. You know what, I could use a little movement. Let's do something to just feel that now, okay, I'm ready to really be here because otherwise I'm going to be everywhere that my brain is telling me to be.
So empathy plays a role in effective leadership. One of the questions that's jumping out to me is what's more important than empathy when it comes to leading a group of people?
More important on the scale of what?
Well, what's your job as a leader? Let's say you own an enterprise
Hmm.
and your job is to maximize shareholder value. What's more important than empathy in Roxana's leadership toolkit?
More important than empathy would be feedback, but the kind of feedback that is regular, which is actual day to day communication.
Mhm.
Yeah. Here's what happened. What's working. What's not working. How can we work it better? How can we make it work better? That's basically what we're talking about and what I'm talking about when I'm saying feedback. And if you mix them, because feedback again is supposed to have good intentions. Your intentions are to make something better or to help somebody grow. So we're going to give them healthy food, not junk food. So that's where empathy comes in. With empathy, I know when I'm communicating, when I'm giving feedback, when I'm in that partnership with you, I'm going to bring my good intentions with me. If I don't have empathy, I don't care. I don't care. I don't even care enough about the situation or the result to even give you the feedback that you need to have or the feedback that you need to hear.
So is a lack of giving feedback because you're so empathetic you don't want to hurt feelings, or you don't care enough to invest the energy?
Think it can be both. If you don't know, again, if you don't know how to work with empathy, if it gets to you and if it drowns you, then it will also stop you. And that's where I was. It will also stop you from telling people things that, again, you assume that they don't want to hear. Sometimes they do, but if you don't say it, you'll never know. And if on the opposite end, if you don't care enough about it, you're not going to even bother to give that feedback. Because to you, that's going to be a waste of time. Oh, I give it because nothing's going to change anyway.
You have to care enough to want to give feedback, but also be empathetic enough to understand that not all people receive feedback in the same way.
That's true. And one other thing that your question made me think about was the fact that you have empathy doesn't mean that you are only going to have empathy for other people because it starts with you. Self-empathy and self-compassion are going to be crucial elements in that because that's the sweet spot that teaches you how to use it and how to balance it so it's not too deep and it's not too shallow.
What is self-empathy?
It's exactly caring and trusting that if you care about you as well as the others, that's absolutely all right. And you care enough to do things, to call things out, to put in some boundaries, and to also help people and situations.
I want to throw a few true or false questions your way.
Go ahead.
And so here's how it works. I'm going to throw some true or false, and your job is to pick a side fast, and then we can unpack it.
Hmm.
Give a reason as to why you're picking that side. I may have done my own research to pick a side, so this is an opportunity for us to debate. So here's the first true or false. True or false? By promoting an empathetic manager into an executive role, it will help an organization cascade empathy across the org.
No, it doesn't work that way because empathy starts with self awareness. And truly, that's where it all starts. And of course, then followed by action. Now that I am aware of the fact that I have or not have empathy, or I have too much or I have too little, then what do I do about it? It does not guarantee. Yes, you're going to have a role model, but that's no guarantee that other people are going to develop that same skill. Empathy is a skill. It's like bring on Arnold Schwarzenegger and everybody will be a bodybuilder. No,
Well,
that's not working that way.
yeah, empathy is a skill. Here's the other fascinating thing that I found that really had me want to bring this question is that the more authority or power one assumes tends to translate to an erosion of empathy,
Mhm.
where there is measurably lower mirror neuron activity. And the study hypothesizes that, we are meant to have empathy for smaller clusters, 50, 100 people. But when you assume authority for larger numbers, then you just don't have the capacity to hold the same amount of empathy. So holding power literally trains empathy out of leaders because you can't possibly hold that empathy. And I found that fascinating.
Example, I think Look at Richard Branson. I think he has a business that's big enough that he doesn't have to lead with empathy, or that you would say he would lose some of that. But like his mantra has always been take care of your people first because they will take care of your clients. That's another example would be Satya Nadella at Microsoft during the pandemic. That's when they came up with the care first model for leadership. That's where they said model, coach, care. So to your point, yes, model that care, model that empathy, coach it, and keep caring. And that's what they've seen working. And especially in a crisis situation, that's what helped them get out of that situation, perhaps differently than other large companies out there. So I wouldn't say size matters in the case of empathy. I think culture matters. I think what we encourage and accept in a company, no matter the size, that's what we probably will see on a display.
So you know that I'm all about human-centered leadership, that yes, a meaningful base to how we operate. But I think it's worth challenging these words that we use inside organizations. So we can glorify Branson, we can glorify, the work of other leaders inside organizations who take a care first approach. And we can all buy into that. But then on the flip side, these are also the leaders that are divesting assets if it's compromising their shareholder value, like being okay with laying off 1,000 employees. And so we can use these words and say we're empathetic. But in the end, what's the objective of leadership? Well, take care of your people, they'll take care of us. Well, I'm sure you've seen the memes. You steal the time away from your kids to work for an organization that then lays you off 6 months later. We can call it a family. We can call it care first. What is the role that empathy actually plays in face of friction that has negative consequences for people?
Negative consequences are going to be there. Like layoffs are going to be there no matter what we do and how we choose to lead. Yeah, I can lead without empathy and still lay off people. I can lead with empathy and lay off people. The difference is going to be how people feel in the meantime, how people feel as they're at doing the work that they're doing. And that's important to, again, another big word that we're using these days, motivation. How do you motivate people? Well, you can only do so much to motivate externally because we know that intrinsic motivation works best. So, yes, how I feel while working for that company for no matter what amount of time I end up working for them, how I feel while doing my work is going to have a direct impact on the quality of what I do. And those are like, I have stats, by the way, which are 21% greater profitability in teams who have kind, empathetic leaders, 17% higher productivity. And I don't know any leader today that does not want to have more productivity, 10% higher customer ratings. And again, in this day and age, that's going to be huge because there's a lot of competition out there. No, that's all I have in terms of stats.
But
But I find
that
it
is the
fascinating.
case.
I find it fascinating because I don't think we think about this in terms of numbers. And again, back to data. I think we think about empathy as this fluffy, cozy concept, and it doesn't have to be because it's really it's a power tool. It allows you to even have access to more of this important data from your own people because they're going to tell you, hey, I think what we're doing here is wrong. I think we should do it that way. And it allows you to listen to that perspective so that you understand what they think is wrong and what their perspective is about doing it differently. Otherwise, yes, you can lead without empathy, But the effect of that is going to be the lack of psychological safety, where people hide things from you. They just plain don't tell you when something's wrong. And you don't want that, because would you want to know if your car breaks? Would you want to know or not before you go to work?
Rather than a culture of fear where you don't get the right information. And I think that at its best, that's what empathy is. Like the root of empathy, based on a German word, I think it was Einfühlung, where it was meant for inanimate objects or looking at art. How do you really stand there and imagine what it's like to be that piece of art or architecture? And I really love that. And it's related to the other German word, Umwelt, where trackers tracking animals would really imagine what it was like to be that animal. And when you look at it that way as a method of connection, a method of getting really good information, then isn't that what so much of leading is how do I connect with you, get the right information so that we can create better things together? Otherwise, as you said, we just rely on authority. There are very few levers we can pull when it comes to motivating a workforce to achieve results when all you rely on is authority. But let me ask you this, true or false? Women are wired to be more empathetic than men.
I think we need to get out of that gender conversation because, okay, women are wired to do different things than men, and men are wired to do things differently than women. It's not just empathy. I don't think women are necessarily born with those huge amounts of empathy. Maybe they get activated at some points in time, but maybe they can get deactivated in day-to-day situations as well, where especially once you learn how to dial it up or dial it down, maybe that's where the difference is, and how women are better able to work with that before perhaps men even think about empathy as a skill and as a concept to use in leadership. But I think there's a bunch of stuff that women can learn from men and men can learn from women when it comes to leadership. It's
For
not.
sure. For sure. I think the reason why I weave this in is because I think most people would say women tend to be more empathetic than men, when the studies show that from a physiological standpoint, the markers of empathy, there's relatively no statistical gap. Where the gap is in how people report it, because based on societal or cultural norms, women are more likely to express empathy or rate themselves as experiencing that more, mostly because of cultural pressure and norms. But
Yeah,
physiologically, there's no difference.
there's no difference. Exactly. Yeah, I don't think so. And one of the things too that might affect this, or that might that's a misconception, where women are thought to have more empathy, and so the expectation is created that a woman who's a leader is gonna absolutely automatically be more empathetic.
That's right. That's right. Okay, true or false? Relying heavily on empathy during decision making will lead to fairer, more objective outcomes for the organization.
Oh, some loaded words there. Again, like we go back to relying heavily. Like, okay, you gotta have that balance. I wanna look at the stats. I wanna look at the definitions. I wanna look at the report. And yes, do I wanna check in with myself and ask, do I have everything that I need to feel well informed for this for this decision? And if I don't, what's missing? And if it's my gut feel, okay, let's go check my gut feel. What do I feel about this? What are really, because I might have all the data that tells me this is a go, but inside I find like, oh, actually, no, I don't even, it might be a go, but I don't want to go that direction. So it's, again, don't rely too heavily. We're back to balance. Right. We can't rely too heavily on one thing. One.
Let's jump to would you rather. I believe leadership is a big game of would you rather. There are trade-offs for everything. And I've deliberately got some difficult trade-offs. I don't want you to sit in the middle. I want you to choose one and then explain why you chose it. Here's the first one. Would you rather have a boss who empathizes deeply with you but can't make tough decisions, or a boss who makes clear, fair, rational decisions but rarely makes you emotionally understood?
Take the rational, hard decisions short term.
Okay. What has you choose that?
My ego, because then I don't have to. I don't have to make tough decisions. I'm not like I can, I I can deal with my own emotions and with not being understood for a while. That's why I'm saying short term. I would go even short, medium term. I would go with that because it allows me to relax and take a breath. And just like that would be someone who, if they're more comfortable in that space, I'm more comfortable in the other space. And yeah, that's a complementary approach to my.
Well, and I guess that there's a consistency with that, right? We talk about how we love consistency, and at least we can develop strategies or models to work with that.
But again, that's because, and I would be actually curious to bring this question to more people because I also think it depends on if you ask a rational tough decision maker leader the same question of would you rather have this or that, I'm curious what they would choose and
Well,
if
yeah.
you end up choosing the complementary or not.
Well, it's a great question. And another question that came to mind earlier that I didn't ask is what role does empathy play in really high performance environments?
It builds psychological safety, which builds trust. And that's where you want people to trust each other so they can work with each other.
You know what? I would love I would love to ask that question to a Navy SEAL, or someone in a very high stakes. Is it important for you to know your teammate has empathy, or that that you just truly know that they're going to deliver their job? Like, is it empathy that has a group of soldiers go in and rescue their team member? Is it empathy? Is that what it is?
It is. I think it is. I think the short answer to that is it is. And I think if you have empathy, that's what allows you to think we have each other's back. I know I can count on you, and we all have good intentions in this team. I'm not going to hide information from you that is crucial for you to know so that you can survive. I'm not going to back off from coming in and helping you to the best of my abilities just because I don't want you to succeed, for example.
Well, let me ask you this. Can we have a connected relationship without empathy?
Well, I think there's a lot of other emotions that help us feel connected. For example, we can both envy the same person and feel connected because we have a common enemy. So we've connected. But there's not because of empathy, not because I have empathy towards you and vice versa. No, we connected because we see that person as the competition as the enemy. And that's it. So yes, connection, but it's going to be short term and it's going to be superficial. I think where empathy comes in is it builds deeper connection to the point where, yeah, it's going to be harder for me to gossip about you with other people. It's going to be hard for me to not help you. It's going to be hard for me. And sometimes that's having too much empathy might actually get in the way. Because if I'm seeing you as okay, but I know they have good intentions. You might actually be doing some pretty bad stuff out there that I'm not even considering or I don't want to consider. So yeah, it can get in the way, but my take is I would rather build relationships that are based on empathy and also work with that and make myself aware of okay, what's really going on in this situation, check in with myself as well, rather than not. Because at the end of the day, if I connect on envy, if I connect on pure competition, let us win and make the other people lose. I don't want to be in that space 3 years from now, look back and say, so what did that get me? Yeah, I have all of these words and I'm completely and utterly alone.
Yeah, I have seen athletes in high performance world rape and pillage their way to medals and victories, and they have nobody around them to celebrate it with. Okay, last would you rather? Would you rather live in a world where everyone has maximum empathy for the people they personally know and little empathy for strangers, or a world where everyone has moderate and equal empathy for all humans?
Gosh, that's, oh, I don't, you know, I think once you develop, I would rather live in a world where we're honest about it and we're going to acknowledge the fact that we are going to have more empathy for people that are closer to us than for people who are complete strangers. So I'll take that. And the reason why is because if I start working with high levels of empathy and spread that around my family members and my friends, that muscle is still going to be there when I'm building a new relationship with a stranger. That's not going to go away. It's not like I leave my all of my empathy muscles at home on the table and then I go out in the world and I don't have them. No, they're going to still be there. So to me, that's if I have high levels of empathy with the people who are close to me, I will definitely have higher levels of empathy than the average levels of empathy in other circumstances or situations where I meet strangers.
I think this is where the data contradicts what you're saying, right? It goes back to something that we said, real deep empathy for the people that you know and no empathy for strangers. In this Would You Rather, it is the reason why so much toxic organizational culture is created, where I deeply connect and resonate with my in group, my team, and we become protectionistic. And then you look at globally, that tribalism that then becomes conflict when we are deeply empathetic and we hold our interests tightly and therefore have very little empathy for the opposing party or group. And that's where I found this question fascinating, because what if we all developed a moderate level of empathy towards humans regardless? That is that not the most effective place where we can use empathy as a means of connecting with anybody and understanding them, rather than risking over indexing with the people closest to us at the cost of
Mm.
conflict?
But where does it all start? Doesn't it all start there? Like that's what I mean by that. You're developing that muscle in a specific environment, and it's still gonna be. And then with that, you're gonna be able to apply it in other environments as well. Think where we're not
Ideally,
ideally.
ideally.
Here's so the thing is, it's not just empathy. Empathy is not that doesn't work in a vacuum. It's not it. Of course, if I'm in an organization where I do have empathy at my team level, that means, and the whole organization doesn't, and I cannot extend it to other teams. That's like, again, maybe my team culture is different than the organizational culture. So it's not just empathy in that case. No, it's not that I have it or I don't have it. It's I might have it and I might have no room to showcase it. But that's a possibility too in some organizations. So I don't think it's just a case of just empathy, full stop.
No, well, when we look at it as a picture, whenever we're looking at working with empathy and it shows up in many different ways, there are questions around what's the level of empathy and understanding? What's the cost
Mhm.
of this level of empathy? emotionally, because so much of burnout is carrying that emotional burden around others, leaders that I've worked with. And so it's a balance of what's
Mhm.
the impact you want to have? What's the cost to you, the organization, the department? But perhaps most importantly, what are the principles around how we make decisions, around the level of empathy and how it matters to our processes? If we don't have principles around that, we can say, yes, empathy is important. There's a definite value. But without unpacking the cost of carrying it, the cost of influencing our decisions, then it becomes irresponsible.
I agree. Yes. Think about the cost of having it and the cost of not having it. Absolutely. Like, and it can be as simple as we're having an appraisal review. How long does it take us to get to the bottom line with empathy, without the empathy? How long does it take you after you get the feedback to get into action mode and do something about it with empathy or without empathy? We can just calculate it about just hourly rates and how long it takes.
For sure. A, a different feedback discussion. I had an underperforming manager working under me when I worked at a firm previous to level 52. And I could have said, hey, your performance is brutal. We're replacing you. Or just given feedback in a more callous approach versus saying, hey, here's what I'm noticing. What's happening with you? What do you think the risk is of the reputation you're building based on some of these things that are noticing? What do you want for yourself? And so, more of a coach approach that's empathetic to get us to a result of giving feedback and obliterating blind spots. And so, there are always two approaches. One may take more thought, intentionality, and investment, but it comes down to what kind of leader do you want to be known for?
Yeah. Yeah. What do you want your impact to be? Back to your question.
What are the stories you want people to tell about what it was like to work with you?
And and you know what? How important are other people's stories about you to you? Like, really? And why? What makes them important? I think that's, but again, and I go back to, and maybe Maya Angelou said it best. People won't remember what you said or what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And I think we know that for ourselves too. Like, I remember exactly how a great leader made me feel, that I could follow them anywhere they would go. And I remember
Yeah.
exactly how a bad leader made me feel, where I wanted to leave, and not just once.
You've referred to empathy as a muscle. If I'm a leader and I want to really leverage empathy in a better way, where do I start?
Start with improving or building your listening muscle and asking questions rather than jumping into solutions. And I know it's so, for example, instead of saying, okay, you should do this and this and that, you can ask, okay, what do you think? What's your perspective? What are some things that you've tried? What can you try next? Just getting into sort of like starting to develop your coaching skills, but as a day to day coach for some of the people in your team. And yes, there will be a time to do it where there's no emergencies and no urgency, not you don't have that time pressure, and you can do that with people. Sometimes, yes, you just have to be the decision maker and say, hey, we're gonna do this. But empathy, I think that's where it starts. Starts with wanting to understand the other people's perspectives, situations, how they see the movie that they're looking at. What are they seeing?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I would layer on a tool that has been so effective for the coaches that I've worked with is to prepare to go into any situation, explore what empathy mapping is, really step into what it is like for somebody to experience their world. It's used in a lot of product design, and we use it in preparing for board meetings or anything, but it really steps you or takes you into the shoes of your audience. Let's go to the other side. What's the worst advice that someone could get around bringing empathy to their leadership?
I think the worst advice would be don't. don't bring that, leave it at the door, or don't bring that at work. Because I've seen s- I've seen it so many times where I think too sometimes we're fighting the need to display some empathy because we've been given that advice, because I need to be, because the image of an effective leader used to be like you have to be tough and ruthless. And actually, when we're trying to fight our sometimes need to display some empathy, to bring some empathy into the conversation, it just makes things worse. And yes, you can be a ruthless leader, but again, as we said, that's not going to necessarily give you results long term. But I think that's why it's the worst advice, because I've seen so many people fight it in moments where if they brought it in the room, it would have made such a way better conversation, and it would have brought so much better results in that moment. But no, they thought it and they didn't bring in it.
I would add a slightly different one is that the worst advice is that in order to be empathetic, you need to let go of standards and expectations, where there is definitely room to have empathy and hold your standards and expectations as a leader. And getting that right will make you wildly effective. But let's wrap this up in this way. We've argued a lot in service of deeper exploration about empathy. And I know that we both know the role that it plays in effective leadership. But if a leader remembers only one thing about empathy after our discussion, what should it be?
It's a muscle, and it's a muscle that you have, and it's your decision to make if you're gonna leave it dormant, or if you're gonna build it up and use it when it matters most.
And in order to know when it matters most, that's being present with the person that you're with, present with the situation.
Yeah, it's like, you know what? The image I saw when I was saying that, I was thinking, when when you come back from the grocery store and you have a whole lot of shopping bags, that's where your arm muscles might come in handy, and your ability to carry 2, 3 bags in one hand. And also maybe your leg muscles help you also when you go up the stairs too. So that's what I mean. Like it's a moment where using all of those muscles will help you. It will get you there faster, better, without injuries. So, using that analogy, what are those grocery shopping moments in a leader's day where they might make use of different muscles, and empathy is one of them?
Yeah, I love that analogy to bring us to a close. If we understand that so many people on our team are carrying heavy baggage, a load, both because of inside and outside of work, how do we notice that and leverage the power of empathy? Two, do what you said, make sure that we get to where we're going without injury. That's a great analogy. So for all of you listeners, find something that you like in this episode, put it to work, make it an experiment. That's what being in the laboratory is. And for this episode, it was all about empathy. Roxana, thank you for joining me on the Executive Commute.
Thank you for having me, Jason.